Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us. It's a real pleasure to be here and also looking through the participant list to see so many familiar names. The only thing that would be better is if we were doing this in person. Um, and I know that's something that we all long for. I do want to just raise my hat to our students who have just been phenomenal. I did my last class last evening, and it's just been amazing how adaptable our students have been and how eager they have been to embrace this new form of learning. We've had very robust discussions, and as you can imagine, since my specialty is crisis and issues management, we've had no shortage of material. And it's been really fascinating to watch our students analyze the way different companies, organizations, individuals have been coming through this crisis. And so, in many respects, it's been like a laboratory, our equivalent thereof, for crisis communications, where we've been able to really make some really phenomenal observations, good, bad, and sometimes ugly. But today, I think what we really wanted to focus on, we have a very diverse group of people. And I want to stress at the outset that feel free to use the chat function, and you're welcome to ask questions as we move through. Uh, I think the focus today, obviously no one knows for sure where we are with this crisis. Winston Churchill had the famous line, are we, at the beginning of the end or the end of the beginning? And I guess nobody really knows. And obviously there's the risk that it could come back even more forceful in the fall. But I think it's safe to say that we're at a point in time where things are starting to open up and people are starting to plan for the next phase of normal, whatever normal may be. And you're probably as sick as I am of hearing that phrase, the new normal. God help us if this is the new normal. But I think what I really want to focus on, and what I've been talking to the students a lot about, is what are smart organizations, frankly, even smart individuals, doing right now to plan for the next phase, and let's call the next phase the reopening, the reconnecting of our economy, the reconnecting of our relationships. One of the things that we frequently do in crisis communications, when I come into a boardroom, for example, and really people are, kind of frantic, they have their hair on fire. Often they have a very difficult time seeing even a few feet in front of them, much less further down the road. And one of the most valuable things that I found to take leadership teams through at that point in time is to get them to do something that I call vision casting. And vision casting is nothing more than really kind of getting them to sort of look on what life will be like, or should be like, or could be like on the other side of the arc. Meaning that if you do everything perfectly well, or as well as you can do it today and over the next couple of weeks, how will people be perceiving your organization? How will they perceive you? When I say people, obviously I'm referring to a broad range of constituents, certainly starting with your own people, your internal organization, but also your customers and maybe your peer group and others. And the best way to get started on that is really to, just like you do on the front end of a crisis, we always advise that you need to isolate the crisis team and really get them focused on nothing but the crisis. And I would say that the same is true in a situation like this, where you really want to isolate what you might call the go team or the comeback team, and getting them to really think through in quite a bit of detail what is that net perception. We often call it the net impact that we want to have, as we come out on the other end. I've been talking a lot about this to our students, and telling them that this can be really a phenomenal period of time to evaluate how they want to come out on the other end better, and what can they be doing now to set that into motion. There's no question that as they enter the job market, they're going to be unique and they're going to be differentiated. And I think there'll be opportunities for them to demonstrate their fortitude and their strength to prospective employers. And I do believe that prospective employers will be coming back. So again, you sit back and you say, okay, how do we want our employees to think, feel, believe about us and the way we're handling this situation when we get to the other side? And then the key thing is to sort of work your way back from that and say, what are the key actions or steps that we need to take in order to accomplish that net perception that we're hoping to achieve with our key constituents? And I think, allowing that to be informed, by the way, by the very constituents that you're trying to impact. I mean, there's nothing wrong with asking your employees and asking your customers to help you understand, what the new uh, landscape is going to look like and what's going to be success for them. So, getting your employees, for example, to help you think about and shape the new work environment would be a good example of what I'm speaking to. And then again, working your way back from that and sort of setting the plan up to go in motion. I think that one of the things that's very clear is that we are not going to have the type of environment that we had before, even when we lose the mask and even when we lose, some of the other restrictions that have been placed upon us. And I don't think it's just going to be purely for health reasons. I think one of the things that we've learned coming through this crisis is that there are a lot of efficiencies that can be gained from conducting business the way we've been forced to conduct it for the last 6 to 8, 10 weeks. So I think you're going to see organizations really rethinking their office, needs. Do they really need a physical office? If they do need a physical office, do they need it to accommodate the full staff structure that they have, or is it mainly a place where they gather maybe 2 or 3 times a week? And so I think you'll see a lot of that type of activity going on. I think you're also going to see a lot more remote servicing of clients and customer relationships. And there's a whole need for a lot of organizations who were kind of gradually moving themselves with technology into a new world order to now move much faster and to really utilize technologies like Zoom that we're using today, but frankly, many other forms. And particularly, I'm not a technology expert, but a lot of things are moving into the cloud and allowing for remote management, remote access. Um, One of the things that I found most interesting, and again, looking at the participants that we have on the call today, there's a very diverse range of ages of people as well. But I think younger people, millennials in particular, have come through this differently than perhaps people of my generation. I mentioned earlier how adaptable they were, but one of the things that I really found interesting, and I think that this is going to be something that is going to have to be reckoned with, is the need for socialization. And so many people thought that it was us older people that needed that regimen of going to the office and, the discipline of that and punching the clock, so to speak. And that millennials would be very, readily adaptable just to work at home or to work from a Starbucks when that's allowed again, or work whatever. But what I've been hearing and seeing and observing from talking to a lot of clients and our own people is they really do like coming together in that work environment. They're stimulated by it, they're motivated by it. So despite what I said previously about we may not return to some of those habits going forward, I do think there's going to be a need to figure out how to maintain that, that social contact, the opposite of social distancing, if you will, as we move forward. Um, One of the things that I'm often asked, when clients that we work with on a daily basis in a crisis situation, I'm often asked, how do we know, when we are, near the end or at the end? And I think particularly in a situation like this, you have to just assume that this is going to be an evolving situation. It's going to change, daily, weekly, monthly. God forbid we have a setback. We could have a rewind of the whole, situation. And so I think it's really just important that if you adopt any state of mind, it's one of adaptability and the ability to be nimble and agile as you move forward. Uh, I guess one of the last things I want to share, and then we'll open it up for any questions that I wanted to share with you that I think applies, frankly, in any crisis in this digital age that we're living in, are some key principles that I think you need to adhere to as you're thinking about communications. I have a book called Brand Under Fire, a new playbook for crisis management in the digital age. And I did fundamentally see a tectonic shift in the way crisis situations emerge and evolve in this new age of digital and social media, where we have sort of this instantaneous networked world. We went from a 24-hour news cycle to a nanosecond news cycle. And often I think it's important to remember why we kind of had this rapid adoption of social and digital technologies. And, fundamentally it was because of a mistrust of institutions. And we've always known that peer-to-peer communications was the preferred way that anybody would want to get information. And along come these digital and social technologies that frankly scale intimacy and make it possible to really have a conversation with massive amounts of people while it's still feeling like you're having a one-to-one conversation. So again, against that backdrop, what are some of the things that you might think about doing differently than you may have in the past? And the first thing that I would say is that you need to really be authentic in your communications. People don't like to hear from, necessarily the company or the institution. They want to hear from the expert. They want to hear from the individual, the person that's closest to being able to give them the right information in a timely fashion. So authenticity is really critical. And I would say that that's important not only for your outward communications, perhaps to your customers, but also authentically communicating with your employees. We've been very honest and forthright with our people during this crisis. I think the Moody College, by the way, has been very authentic in its communications with our students and with the parents of our students. And I think that's really the only way that you can hope to have any success. The second is transparency. So you have to assume in this day and age where everything is so intertwined and networked that everything's discoverable in time. And the most important thing to understand is, do you want the narrative, your narrative, to be shared for you, or do you want to share it on your terms and have it revealed on your terms? And I think most of us would want to be able to project that narrative in the way that we want it to be understood. And so transparency is critical. Third is speed. Things move very quickly, and you have to have the ability really to act very quickly and really adapt and move fast. So speed is critical and agility is critical, meaning that as you communicate, understanding in the moment how people are, are seeing things, and really being prepared to adjust your communications according to, what you're seeing in real time. And then the final thing is creativity. And people often look at me like I'm crazy when I talk about creativity in a crisis situation. But the best way I can really help people understand that is that if you think that you're competing with every form of media to get your story told or to get your position understood, then it stands to reason that whoever has the most creative, compelling, interesting content that makes it easier for the people on the receiving end to quote unquote get it is going to win the day. And so the days of old where we would issue a statement or a press release and be kind of one and done until we need to do the next update are really over. We now have to think in a multifaceted way about video and about other digital forms of content, infographics and animations. And this is where I think our students, by the way, I want to be bragging on them again, but the Moody College of Communication students have such a diverse range of disciplines, from pure journalistic skills to radio, television, film, and we're really, I think, developing the next generation of multifaceted communicators, and that's going to really help them be effective in these crisis situations. So let me take a pause there for a second and see if we have any questions. I'm going to look down at another source for questions. So forgive me for 1 second. So I had two questions that came in prior to the meeting beginning. And one said that we often talk about leadership in crises, but we don't talk about followership, which I think is a very interesting concept, one that I've frankly not given a lot of thought to before. But I think particularly if you're in an organization and you're trying to show yourself to be, someone that, that wants to advance, let's say, what would a leader be looking from a follower in the organization? And I think this is one of those times where it's all hands on deck. And I think strong and smart leaders are looking for engaged followers. This is what I said earlier about really reaching out and speaking directly to the people that you want to create the end perception with, to kind of get an idea from them. So if you're a follower, if you're someone that's not necessarily in the top leadership position, there's probably never been a better time to share your views, your points of view, ways to improve the work environment, ways to improve customer relations. I think leadership will have a stronger ear during these times than you might find in the ordinary grind of things. So again, if you're a follower, obviously you want to be supportive of the team, but you also want to have the ability to make sure that your voice gets heard. So somebody said, what's the most important thing? Another question, most important thing to remember in terms of communicating with teams during a crisis situation. And I think, this crisis in particular, you really need to be hypersensitive to how much people need and want information. And so particularly as it relates to your internal teams, the opportunity to update them fairly regularly about the state of things. And again, going back to what I said previously, being very straightforward, authentic, and transparent with them. Don't try to sugarcoat the situation. That will fall flat, immediately. But the ability to really kind of be honest with them. Many of the organizations that we're counseling through this crisis have kind of established a cadence where maybe on a Thursday or a Friday, before their folks are heading into the weekend, which weekends and weeks have been kind of blurring, you might see a video message coming from one or more of the senior leadership of the company trying to acknowledge the situation, kind of the current state, what we're doing. I've seen a nice mixture of people really building in empathy for the workforce and really trying to get them to understand that you understand what they're going through and that you want to do anything you can to help them. If that takes them into the weekend, often you'll want to ask if you have any questions or anything that's on your mind. Feel free to reach out directly to me, and I think that's important, by the way, not through HR or through some other third party, but directly to the leader. And then, on Monday, Tuesday, maybe there's an email or a memo that goes out, the old-fashioned, form, where instead of doing another video, you just said, many of you asked these 2 or 3 or 4 questions, and you then, provide answers. Again, making sure that they feel like you're empathetic and that you have an ear to what they're saying. You're hearing them, you're listening to them. So I think those would be some of the, the key, considerations. I can't emphasize enough how important it is to engage everyone possible in your organization in the future plan. That's probably the best way, to ensure that they really feel like they're being heard, their ideas are being heard, and that they know that, you're going to really act on some of the things that they're doing. You do those kinds of things, and people tend to come through crisis situations like this, or they can come through crisis situations like this much stronger than they went into them. I often hear clients say that I felt like as a team, as an organization, because we were put to the test, because we had to operate under fire, it tested the organization and it made us stronger. And I think we'll be a better team going forward. And I think that's a critical factor. So I'm going to pause, see if there's any other questions coming through. This is a question from a parent, and it's one that candidly I think is probably on the minds of many parents. What's the prospect, I should say, for careers, entry careers, for our students who are graduating, now. And it'd be less than candid if I didn't say that it's a real tough environment out there. But I think that it's an environment that's going to change very quickly. And I mean, maybe that's me being optimistic, but I don't think this was a traditional downturn or recession. You've heard everybody talk about the fact that we sort of had to turn it off. And I don't think we're going to turn it back on as quickly as we turned it off. But I think as we move into the third and particularly the fourth quarter, we are going to see demand come back. I mean, before we went into this crisis, it was getting very tight, the labor market. And so I think that that's going to recover. The advice that I'm giving my students right now is to be patient, to be active, to be networking. There's this magical demarcation line between the time that you graduate and you step over the line to become now somebody that's looking for a job. On this side of the line, and particularly in these circumstances, virtually everybody will meet with you. And so now's the best time possible to be networking, to be really looking for, the ideal career opportunity that you want, and then just keep working at it. I also believe that you really need to kind of have a good, strong understanding of what you've gotten out of this experience and be prepared to talk about that, because I think when we get back into the interviewing process, there's going to be a huge opportunity for you to demonstrate. And now I'm speaking to the students, but maybe the parents that are on the call can reinforce this, with their kids. There's going to be an opportunity to talk about what you did as you came through this, and that's going to really be an opportunity to sort of shape your brand. And I think that's really critical. See if I have any other questions. Well, there's a question here about, do I believe that the university will return to classes in the fall? And I think the sub question to that is, will we play football in the fall? But what I'm seeing today as I look across the collegiate landscape, and we actually do a lot of work in higher education, I'm seeing a lot of indications that tell me that we're going to return to campuses with, guarded guidelines, distancing, and the like. But there's just too much that people really want and need for us not to return to campuses. And every day, if you go back to when we went into this crisis, you'll recall that really Harvard was the first one to cancel all classes. And once they canceled, it was like a steamroller that one after another, they all did. Well, we're starting to see that same sort of effect on the return, where you've had, at least now a dozen universities. Today, for example, the University of Arizona made it official that they're returning to the campus in the fall. So as that happens, it gives permission for more and more institutions to do the same thing. So I suspect that we are going to return, for the most part, to campus in the fall. There'll be some different guidelines in terms of class sizes and allowing for social distancing. There'll be extra protections that'll be put in place for, some maybe the older faculty members, older staff members who, are of that age that we've got to be really careful. But I suspect that we're gonna return. Another question that I got, not on this chat, but in a previous call that I did was, what are some of the crises that are looming beyond COVID-19 when we return? And I think, that's frankly a very good thing for universities, institutions to be thinking about, because I can very well imagine a situation where if and when we do return, let's say we return in the fall, there could very well be a group of students who, aren't ready for that. And you could see protests, you could see walkouts, you could see any number of different actions being taken by both students and faculty. And similarly, if we have universities or institutions that don't return, I think similarly you could see people that are effectively saying, like you're seeing now, frankly, let's get on with it. Let's return to this normalcy. So I think that's about 25 minutes in, and we've had an opportunity to answer 4 or 5 questions. If there's any last questions, I'm happy to answer them. But otherwise, I just want to take a moment to thank you for joining us on this Moody chat. I want to thank those of you that I know are on here who are huge supporters of the university and of the Moody College of Communication. We appreciate you. We appreciate your support. To those parents, that are on the call, thanks for entrusting us with your kids and letting us help them as you are helping them through this very challenging time. And most of all, I want to say that you should be very proud of the way they've handled this situation. And I think that they're going to have some great stories to tell their grandkids. So thank you very much and have a great afternoon.